is a lot of Americans are living with different life narratives, different stories. And so what Buddhism can do is perhaps try to offer a new narrative for Americans, one of oneness, compassion, loving kindness. And so what I wanted to talk today is about narratives and the stories we create for ourselves and how it orients our lives. These verses 8, 9, and 10 are from a bodhisattva named Dharmakara, who meets a great Buddha named Lokesvararaja. And he's actually an unnamed king, and he's so struck by this meeting that he becomes Dharmakara and practices and vows for the rest of his life to attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. So the title of my talk today is What's Your Story? So there is something called narrative therapy. And what it says is that we kind of create a narrative or life story for the events in our lives. And depending on what we emphasize and how we tell the story and when the story begins, really can affect the way we see ourselves. And so the events in our lives don't change, but when we become Buddhists, at least it helped me reframe my life story and maybe change the beginning and hopefully change the ending. So this comes from a course I gave on everydaybuddhist.org. It's our online school. It was called Metaphors, Myths, and Narratives. And tonight I'd like to focus on narratives. And I found this nice quote from D.T. Suzuki. He said, "If we were nothing but intellectual beings, there would be no hope for a spiritual life." So the idea here is we are creatures of stories. We create stories for ourselves. And I've read and heard lately that all of politics is a narrative, right? It's competing narratives. And when we vote, we're picking the narrative we most would like to live by. And this is also something that's done in a setting of counseling. So narrative therapy consists of several different aspects. Here, the counselor's on the left, the patient is on the right, and I think she's recalling a narrative of one of maybe contextualizing her childhood only in terms of maybe the friction between her mother and father. So it says here, we do an interpretation of our experience is done through language. Narrative can help us make sense of our experiences. It can order it. Even just putting down the events in your life in time order, in the proper order, can really give your life, can organize your life and make it feel less chaotic. I have some friends and family members, the way they remember their life story, oftentimes the events are out of order, and that makes a huge difference, right? If you take events out of order, it really messes up the timeline and the meaning and the cause and effect in your life. It says here that individuals can have different realities of the same experience. A son and a daughter could really see their childhood differently based on the narratives they construct. And interactions with others impacts how we experience reality. So it's kind of a feedback loop. How we see the world influences how we experience the world. And one interesting thing that they found is just writing a journal, having a journal at night and just writing things down. The act of writing it down makes it more concrete, and it's less feelings and emotion, and you kind of have to capture it and articulate it in a more disciplined way. And I'm a very visual person, so I kind of have to see things on paper. The other big part of your life story is the once upon a time part. When does the clock start? When do you start the storytelling of your life? And also, if once upon a time also can signal a timeless story. This story of Dharmakara that I mentioned happened millions and millions and millions of eons ago. And it's not really literal time, but it's placing it in a timeless spiritual context. So that's why all these stories are once upon a time. That's why Star Wars says, The story happened long, long ago in a place far, far away. You know, it's science fiction and it's high tech, and yet it happened eons ago. So it's kind of it's a timeless story, and it places you in an alien environment in which you don't have the normal milestones and markers to hang on to. So it opens you up to this story. You come into it with a clean slate. So it says here, narrative therapy is a method of therapy that separates a person from their problem. It encourages people to rely on their own skills to minimize problems that exist in their lives. Throughout life, personal experiences become personal stories. People give these stories meaning, and the stories help shape a person's identity. Narrative therapy uses the power of these stories to help people discover their purpose. This is often done by assigning that person the role of narrator in their own life story. So you kind of take responsibility for your life story. You're not a victim, but you become a storyteller. You own the story. There's also a famous Buddhist scholar named Luis O. Gomez, who just passed away suddenly, I think in 2017. He suggests that we read this story of Dharmakara that happened eons ago in a literal way. And I thought, well, how can you possibly read this literal when it's not historic? And what he's saying is it's creating a spiritual vista, that we adopt this timeless spiritual story of a great seeker as a new narrative for our lives. It's describing the way the world would look to somebody who's awakened and has insight. So in that sense, it's true. It can be taken as literally the way you see the world. So he says, what would have made the existence of Dharmakara believable to an audience in ancient India? What would that belief look like if it were understood literally and not simply as a metaphor for some philosophical or ethical conception? I have argued that we must add to these evidently vital and valid forms of reading the sutras a dimension that, for lack of a better word, I have called narrative vistas. Worlds can be constructed narratively in such a way that the believer begins to have a clear view, a vista, and perhaps a vision that, despite its apparent unnaturalness, constitutes a reality that becomes natural by virtue of narrative power, because it is in our own nature to live in narrative realities, and religion is not an exception to this rule. So I found this book recently called Pure Land, History, Tradition, and Practice. And I wanted to share a couple quotes with you. He says that a story forms the heart and foundation of Pure Land Buddhism. Elements of the story are scattered across several texts. Nevertheless, the narrative about to unfold is the story for all practitioners of Pure Land Buddhism. Many eons ago, a Buddha named Lokesvara appeared in the world. An unnamed king heard of this and developed an aspiration to attain enlightenment under his tutelage and for the sake of all beings. Renouncing his kingdom, he became a monk, bodhisattva named Dharmakara, and joined Lokesvara's assembly. As Dharmakara outlined his religious aims to his master, he laid particular emphasis upon the various qualities of the Buddha land that he intended to establish upon his enlightenment. Dharmakara, finally, 10 eons ago, he achieved perfect awakening and became the Buddha known as Amida Buddha. The fact that he attained his goals means that all his vows came to fruition. The tradition that we will be exploring bases itself squarely upon the story that describes how Amida conceived and executed his Buddha land. It understands that the fulfillment of the vows he undertook at the outset of his long and arduous journey to Buddhahood laid open a way for ordinary, non-elite Buddhists to escape samsara and secure their true awakening. So I like to call this kind of it's a creation myth, in a sense, of the reality of Buddha nature. Something that permeates our reality, it's all around us, and yet it's very difficult for us to appreciate. So this is a establishes a path, a story, a vista for everyday people. This is Namo Amida Butsu. This is the name or the sound of ultimate reality. And I wanted to share this quotation with you again, the first 8 verses. And here we have verses 1, 2, and 3. So I wanted to show you how this sutra chanting, Sambutsuge, pivots. The first 3 verses, it is Dharmakara praising his teacher. He's saying, your radiant countenance is majestic. Your dignity is boundless. Radiant splendor such as yours has no equal. The countenance of the Buddha, the perfectly enlightened one. So the beginning of the Sambutsuge, he's praising his teacher, which we chanted tonight. And then suddenly, on verses that I mentioned, 8, 9, and 10, he suddenly switches to the first person. So this becomes Dharmakara's voice. And it becomes the story becomes personal. He's identifying with his teacher, and now he's making the same vows, and he's living the same vista. So he says, I vow to become a Buddha. My practice is giving, self-discipline. I resolve. I become. I will fulfill. I will give great peace. So the one thing I've noticed when I've chanted this over and over again is that the first person in here, there's transference where I'm speaking, right? I become, this becomes my aspiration. This becomes my statement. It becomes my story. So, I identify with Dharmakara. I chant this for a long time, and rather than mimicking the words of another, that becomes personal to me, and they become my words, and I am giving them voice. And I'm becoming a character in this shared narrative of a path that's available to all beings. And bit by bit, little by little, over time, we begin to create our own Buddha land, and we rewrite our spiritual story. And that's the thing that Buddhism really gave me. I have a new narrative for my life. I see my childhood differently. I see my upbringing differently. I live with more of a sense of gratitude and appreciation. I see what I have rather than what is missing. I no longer feel like a victim. I feel like, life is pushing me along, and everything that's happened to me has been from the effort of others. And so, you can live your life lots of different ways. You can adopt a lot of different narratives. Buddhism is proposing one, a new path, a new vista, and a new narrative. And when I read the larger sutra now, I used to have trouble with it because I thought it was historical. Then I decided it was doctrinal, philosophical, and ethical. And now when I read it, I read it the way I watch Star Wars. It's opening a new way of seeing the world. And it's inviting me to become part of this story and to become a character within this vision and to adopt it as part of my own life. And so I think narrative therapy, I asked around some of the doctors that we have at this tradition in our temple, doctorates in psychology or psychiatry. I asked them about narrative therapy, and they said, yes, it's a thing, it's well respected, and I think it has a real overlap with the importance of the larger sutra and why this mythical story of the Bodhisattva Dharmakara was so engaging in India, China, and Japan. If you read it and you feel it and you see the world through this story, it has a huge impact on the way you can live your life. So if you could please join me in Gasho to close my Dharma talk. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo.
それから今日はですね、3月の正月法要にお越しくださいまして誠にありがとうございます。この本堂には今日25、6人の方々がお参りいただいております。それから、YouTube の方で、流させていただいてます。たくさんの方がですね、毎月、この大事な 法要、これ正月と申しますね、その月々にお亡くなりになった方々を、忍ぶね、思い出すこと大事ですね。私たちのお父さんやお母さん、あるいはおじいちゃまおばあちゃん、ご主人様、あるいは奥様、子供さんかも分かりません。そういう方々を思い出す、そして忍ぶって言いますね。それを忍ぶというわけですね。こんなこと言われたなとか、こんなことあったな、でもこの世で本当に会えてよかったねってね、そういうことを思い出して、感謝する。これがとても大事なこの法要の意味です。で、今日はですね、皆さんに何をお伝えしようかなと思ったんですけどね、ちょっとこの難しい字で自灯明、法灯明って言ってるんですけどね、この自灯明、法灯明っていうのは仏教の中でもとても大事な言葉なんですね。これはね、何を言うかというとね、お釈迦様がね、お釈迦様っていう方はご存知の通りに人間様だったわけですよね。人間だから私たちと同じようにおぎゃーと生まれて、2500年前にインドとネパールの国境で生まれられて、そして一生、80年ね、80歳まで生きられた方です。人間様なんですね。でこの人間様のお釈迦様が悟りを取られたと、こういう方です。でこの方が仏教を始められたわけですよね。そうしましたらね、やっぱり人間である限りは生まれた後は必ず最後があるわけです。そういうことでこのお釈迦様はですね、おぎゃーと生まれられて、そして35歳でいわゆるお悟りを開かれたわけですね。でその後長いこといわゆる伝道の生活といいますか、いわゆるお弟子さんたちに自分が目覚めた内容をですね、教えをみんなに教えていかれたわけですよ。でやっぱり人間ですから最後が来るわけです。でその最後の日が2月のだいたい15日となっておりますけれども、この2月15日にですね、お亡くなりになった、今から2500年前ぐらいですね、ずいぶん前ですよね、紀元前です。でこの時にね、やっぱりお弟子さんたちがね嘆いたわけですよ。特にアナンさんというね、アナン尊者という方がおりますけれどもね、この方はお釈迦様と一緒にいつもいろんなところに行かれたんです。いわゆる秘書みたいなもんで、セクレタリーみたいなもんですよね。一緒に行かれて、でお世話をされた方なんです。しかしやっぱりお釈迦様は最後の日を迎えることになったね。これがね、最後の日のねご様子なんですよ。これ釈迦入滅って書いてますね。ちょっと皆様にはちょっとスクリーンが小さいかも分かりません。でもYouTube の方はしっかりご覧になっていると思いますけれども、釈迦入滅ということはね、お釈迦様がこの世からもうお亡くなりになることを釈迦入滅ということです。でこの時ね、たくさんのいわゆるお弟子さんがおられるわけですよ。このお釈迦様がベッドに横たわってらっしゃるね。これ北の方にその頭を向けてらっしゃるんですけれども、そしてその周りには菩薩さんがずっとね囲んでらっしゃるね。そしてたくさんの人たちが嘆き悲しんでます。そして下の方にはいっぱいね動物がいますよ。象さんとかね、あるいはライオンとかね、いますね。たくさんいますよね。こういう動物たちが森から出てきてね、お釈迦様が最後なんだって、悲しいねってね。でこの上の方にはね、いわゆる仏様がお迎えに来てるわけですね。そうですよ。この写真は大変面白いですね。このいわゆるドローイングといいますか、絵なんですけどね。で最後の言葉、いわゆるね、アナンさんが、お弟子さんのアナン尊者がですね、お釈迦様にお釈迦様どうしましょう、もう最後になりましたねって、私たちは本当に悲しくて仕方がありません。できることなら永遠に生きていてほしいとこうおっしゃるわけです。どうですか、皆様方の愛しい方々の時もそうじゃなかったですかね。お父様の時や お母様の時やご主人様の時や奥様の時やおじいちゃまおばあちゃまの時ね、最後の時を迎えるにあたってね、できるならもっと生きててほしいと思わなかったですか？みんなそう思うでしょう。私の母が言った時も思いましたよ。もっともっと生きててほしいのに、なんでこんなことになるのかなって思いました。そうなんですよ。阿南尊者も同じ気持ちでね、お釈迦様はできることなら永遠に生きててほしいと、こう言うわけです。でもお釈迦様はね、阿南知ってるだろう、この世に生まれたものは人間だけじゃなくして動物も植物も全部生きてるものは最後が来るんだよってこうおっしゃるわけですよ。すべてのものには寿命があるんだよって、それが無常であるということですね。無常、常ではないということです。いつもいつも同じことが起こるわけじゃないということです。そして必ず最後を迎えるんだとこうおっしゃるわけですね。そして阿南尊者は、お釈迦様、私はどうしましょう、明日から何を頼りにして私は生きていけばいいんでしょうねとこうおっしゃるわけです。これは一体私は心の拠り所をどこに置けばいいのかということをおっしゃってるわけですよ。そうするとね、お釈迦様はね、阿南よ、何を言っている、今まで私は全部あなたに教えたじゃないですか。だから何も悲しむことはない、何も恐れることはない。これからは自分を頼りにして生きていきなさい。そしてこれからは仏法、私が教えた方を心の拠り所として生きていけなさいとこうおっしゃれるわけですよね。だからここで申し上げましたね、先ほど申しましたjitomyo、hotomyoというのは自らを灯火として、そして法というのは仏法、お釈迦様の教えを心の拠り所として生きていきなさいというのが、これがお釈迦様の最後の言葉なんです。いかがですか？皆様方の愛しい人の最後の言葉は何でしたか？覚えてられますか？それを思い出すのがこの正月法要ですね。そしてね、この心の拠り所っていうのはね、一体何のことかということです。精神的な拠り所です。安心する場です。自分で納得いくということです。ね、ちょっと違う写真をご覧ください。この心の拠り所っていうのはね、これはなかすという言葉ね、サンスクリットで申しますとね、心の拠り所っていうのは中国語や日本語に返すとなかすという言葉なんです。なかすってご存知です？海とか川とかの間にポコッとこういわゆる土地が出てますね。これをなかすというわけです。大阪にはね、なかすという場所がありますね。だから海がこういわゆる荒れた海とか川の中にぽっかりとこういうふうに土地が出ている。これをなかすというわけです。なんでこれが心の拠り所かなっていうとね、いわゆる皆さんどうです？このいわゆる荒れ狂った海の中にこう投げ出されてっていうのは、これ世の中、この世の中ですよ。この世の中いろんなことがありますよね。もうちょっとコロナとオミクロンが少し収まったかなと思いますけれども、今ちょっと世界見てください。とても怖いことになりそうですね。戦争起こってますね、ヨーロッパで。そうでしょ？ひょっとしたら核を持ち出す国があるかもわからない。戦ってもらっては大変ですね。戦争もう起こっていますけれども、ひょっとしたら世界 がすべて私たちの生活にももう影響していますよ。そうでしょう。第三次世界大戦は絶対起こしてはいけない。こういうね、今すごいね、世界が揺れています。平和が崩れています。これこそ私たちはこの大海、海の中にね、荒れ狂うね、海の中に私たちは生きているようなもんですよ。この中で私たち何を心の拠り所として生きていけばいいんですかと。こういうことです。心が安定するところ。これが中洲であるということです。ね。ですからこれをいわゆる私どもはキエとか奇妙とかナムとこういうわけです。仏様お出になりましたね。今、阿弥陀様がお出になってくださいました。ね。こうなんです。いわゆる私の心が落ち着くとこ。英語でね、心の拠り所っていうことは take refuge ということです。take refuge ということは、例えばここが急に火事になった場合ね、いわゆる避難するでしょ。避難のところが。避難するところは安全なんです。避難するところを心の拠り所なんです。わかりますか？私の心が落ち着くところ、私のいわゆる怖い心とか恐れる心がなくなるところ、ここだったら安全なんだと思えるところが心の拠り所なんですね。これをキエとか奇妙とかナモというふうに言います。ねえ、このね、仏法を聞く皆様、今日はこういうふうに、仏様のお話を聞いてくださっている。これがですね、それぞれ皆様方の心の拠り所になるのです。仏様のお話を聴聞すると言いますけれどね、聞かれることが心の拠り所になるわけです。そしてまた皆様方の愛しく思われる、前にもう亡くなってられる往生された方々のことを思い出して、その声をもう一度聞こうと、そして聞けば聞くほど心が安らかになっていく。これが心の拠り所です。そしてこれこそがお念仏南無阿弥陀仏であるということです。ね、ここにね、御仏の皆を唱える我が声は我が声ながら尊かりけりと、こういうふうに書かせていただいておりますけれど、これは甲斐和理子先生という方のね、いわゆる、お歌でございますけどね。ですからこの私が何万打仏でお念仏言ってると思うけれど、それは自分が言ってるんではないですよっていうことです。それはもう仏様になられた方々から南無阿弥陀仏という声を私が聞いているのだということです。だからこそこの私の口から出る南無阿弥陀仏は自分の声だけれどもなんと尊いものであるかということですね。いわゆるこれこそ阿弥陀様からいただいた南無阿弥陀仏であるということなんですね。そのお念仏を聞かれながら、いただきながら、そして自ら念仏を言われることによって心の拠り所ができるということです。今日はそういうことでですね、jitomyo、hotomyoということを今日はお話しさせていただきました。本当に今日は3月の、初月法要にお参りいただきまして誠にありがとうございます。それでは日本語の法話をこれにて終わらせていただきますので合唱いたしましょう。南無阿弥陀仏、南無阿弥陀仏、南無阿弥陀仏、南無阿弥陀仏、南無阿弥陀仏。Thank you very much. So I want to make one announcement. as a BCA Eitaikyo virtual service. It's going to be on March 13, Sunday. So you can find the link. Link will be provided on a OCBC website. And then that day, March 13, Sunday, there is no mindful meditation service, no Sunday service at here OCBC. But please join the BCA Eitaikyo perpetual sutra chanting service virtual. It's going to be a Zoom link will be provided on OCBC website. And then also, we're happy to announce we're going to have a spring Ohigan seminar, spring equinox seminar service, inviting Dr. Nobuo Haneda. Seminar will be on YouTube, available on Saturday, March 19th at 9:30 a.m. You can watch it anytime. And then also, Sunday service is going to be virtual. Sunday, March 20th, 10 o'clock. And it's going to be hybrid. So the ritual part is ministry is going to do a Sunday service, March 20th here, and then we're going to see and listen to Dr. Haneda's Dharma messages in English and Japanese on the screen right here. Okay? それちょっと日本語でさせていただきましょう。BCA 英体教サービスが、3月13日の日曜日にございます。リンクは OCBC のウェブサイトをご覧ください。この13日は、メディテーションも、それから、日曜礼拝もございません。それから春のお彼岸サービス、またセミナーございますけれども、今年も羽田信夫先生をご紹介いたしまして、セミナーはですね、YouTube にて3月の19日、サタデー、土曜日でございます。9時半から放映しております。そして法要の方は翌日の20日にございます。このように、対面でお越しくださっても大丈夫でございます。また YouTube でもご覧になることができますので、どうぞご参加くださいませ。Thank you very much for coming today and please drive safely. どうも今日はありがとうございました。